The knock came sharp on a Tuesday morning. Not a neighbor, a process server with a thick envelope. Edward Grayson took the papers without a word. His hands were steady. Surgeon steady. Surgeon steady. Inside the study, the envelope tore open. A guardianship petition, filed by his own daughter, Nancy Grayson. In the matter of Edward Grayson, an alleged incapacitated person, the respondent, his daughter, Nancy.
She actually did it. My own daughter is trying to take control of my life.
But the shock lasted only a heartbeat. 3 decades on the appellate bench had forged a mind that didn't miss details.
This petition is missing the required sworn medical affidavit. Nancy's lawyer is an amateur.
Edward circled the fatal flaw in red ink. The court required more than a daughter's accusation. It needed a doctor's sworn statement.
I've waited for a case I could tear apart with my own hands. This is it.
Edward leaned back. The petition lay on his desk like a gauntlet thrown, and a retired judge never backs down. Edward turned to his computer and entered the name of the doctor listed on the petition. Dr. Carl Vernon.
If I am going to challenge this, I need to know exactly who Nancy hired to evaluate me.
Within minutes, the screen filled with public records, a history of disciplinary actions against Vernon.
3 prior sanctions for fraudulent evaluations. This isn't a medical opinion. It's a character assassination for hire.
By evening, a fax arrived from the state medical board. Vernon's record was a roadmap of deception.
3 sanctions, each one for a fraudulent evaluation. This is the weak link.
Edward drafted a motion to dismiss, citing the petition's fatal flaw and Vernon's corruption.
I'll represent myself. 30 years on the bench taught me more than any lawyer.
He worked through the night, assembling a case that would turn the tables in open court. By morning, the motion was signed. The first shot in a battle Nancy never expected him to fight. Later that morning, a car pulled into the driveway. Nancy Grayson walked up the front path, her smile painfully rehearsed. Edward opened the door before she could knock. He led her to the living room and took his seat, leaving her standing like a witness on the stand.
To what do I owe the pleasure, Nancy? And don't say you were in the neighborhood.
Dad, I am just checking on you. You've been so isolated lately.
Isolated. That's the word she'll use in court. Every line she speaks is designed for the record. Is that why you filed a petition claiming I am incompetent? For my own good?
The mask slipped, just for a second. Then it was back, but Edward had already seen the truth.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's a legal matter.
Edward didn't blink. He had presided over 100 trials and knew when a witness was lying. Nancy turned and walked out, her heels echoing down the hall. The door clicked shut. The battle was now personal. Edward arrived at the courthouse the next day, briefcase in hand. The granite steps felt like home. Inside, the marble corridors echoed with the footsteps of lawyers and defendants. But Edward walked through them like a judge returning to his own court.
This is where I belong. Not as a defendant, but as the man who knows the law better than anyone here.
The clerk took the motion with a familiar nod. She had worked here when Judge Grayson presided.
Her eyes said everything. Judge, they've picked the wrong man.
The motion was stamped, and a hearing date was set for 2 weeks out. Edward walked out, the weight of decades on the bench lifting his stride. At home, Edward stood before the mirror, adjusting his cuffs. The image, staring back, was the same one that had stared down 100 lawyers.
Now the real work begins. Nancy has no idea what she's walked into.
He spent the rest of the day organizing his evidence. The motion to dismiss was only the beginning. That evening, Edward closed his last folder with a quiet click. The battle was his to win, and he had never been more ready. The next morning, Edward called Dr. Elaine Morrison, a neuropsychologist with an untarnished reputation.
Dr. Morrison, I need an independent evaluation. My daughter has filed a competency petition, and I intend to prove her wrong.
By that afternoon, Edward sat in Morrison's office, calmly answering every question with the precision of a former judge.
Your recall is remarkable, Mr. Grayson. Many younger patients don't perform this well.
She's thorough, not like Vernon. This report will carry weight in court.
2 days later, a courier delivered a sealed report. Edward read it slowly, a rare warmth spreading through his chest.
Full cognitive capacity. No signs of decline. This is the kind of evidence that ends cases.
He placed Morrison's report into his expanding file, right next to Vernon's sanctions record. The contrast would be undeniable.
Now the court will see what a real evaluation looks like. Nancy's house of cards is about to collapse.
That night, Edward added one more name to his witness list. Dr. Elaine Morrison would testify, and she would bury Vernon 3 days before the hearing. A letter arrived from Nancy's attorney. It was a settlement offer disguised as mercy.
A settlement? That's the move of a lawyer who knows his case is sinking.
Voluntarily relinquish control and consent to supervised financial management. In return, we will withdraw the petition without prejudice.
She wants me to hand over my own life for a promise of dignity. That is not mercy. It's a shakedown.
Edward reached for the phone. The call to Nancy's attorney lasted less than 2 minutes.
Tell your client that I will see her in court, and if you file any more frivolous motions, I'll seek sanctions against you personally.
He hung up, then drafted a formal rejection letter. His pen moved across the page in bold, deliberate strokes.
They wouldn't offer this unless they were terrified of what I'll reveal. The panic is starting.
Across town, Nancy received the news. Her phone almost slipped from her hand. The easy win had vanished. Edward had turned the table. Now it was Nancy who had to decide: retreat and admit guilt, or face him in open court. 2 days before trial, the court convened a pre-hearing conference. Edward walked into the quiet room carrying a thick binder.
This is where I turn their own witness into a liability. The judge needs to see Vernon's record.
Mr. Grayson, you've filed a motion to introduce Dr. Vernon's disciplinary history. The petitioner objects. State your grounds.
Your Honor, this evidence goes directly to the credibility of the petitioner's sole medical expert. A sanctioned doctor is not a neutral evaluator.
Nancy's attorney rose and called it prejudicial character evidence, but his voice wavered. The judge leaned forward. Edward crossed the well and laid the disciplinary record before the judge. The room went still.
I've reviewed the sanctions. This evidence is highly probative and directly relevant to the witness's qualifications. The objection is overruled.
The gavel fell softly. The judge's words stripped the shield from Vernon before he could even testify.
The trap is set. When Vernon takes the stand, I'll spring it wide open. Nancy's entire case now hinges on a disgraced doctor.
As he left the courthouse, the weight had shifted. The ruling was public now, and so was Vernon's shame. The morning of the hearing arrived without ceremony. Edward walked into the courtroom and took his seat, spine straight. Nancy sat in the gallery, her hands clenched. Her lawyer rose for an opening statement that painted Edward as forgetful and erratic.
They're relying on conjecture, not one objective test, just invented anecdotes.
The clerk called Dr. Carl Vernon. He took the witness stand with a practiced smile, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses.
I conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Mr. Grayson. His short-term memory is compromised, his reasoning disjointed. He is no longer fit to manage his affairs.
Nancy's lawyer fed him, leading questions, and Vernon answered smoothly, painting a bleak portrait of a fading mind.
Would you say this decline is progressive?
Absolutely. In my professional opinion, it will only worsen without proper supervision.
It's working. The judge is listening. He's buying every word.
When Vernon's direct testimony ended, the courtroom fell silent. Then Edward stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. Edward approached the witness. His voice held the quiet authority of 3 decades on the bench.
Dr. Vernon, how long was your evaluation of me? Not the report writing, the actual face-to-face assessment.
Approximately 45 minutes. That is more than sufficient time for a competent diagnostician.
And in that time, did you administer any standardized cognitive tests, such as the MMSE or the MoCA?
I relied primarily on clinical interview and behavioral observation. Those methods are widely accepted.
Judge Keller uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, eyes shifting between the witness and Edward.
No objective tests at all? No memory scales? No executive function assessments? You diagnosed cognitive decline based on conversation?
I have decades of clinical experience. I don't need a checklist to recognize impairment.
The judge's pen stopped mid-word. In the silence, the weight of the cross-examination settled over the room like dust.
So your entire diagnosis rests on a 45-minute chat with no objective backing. Is that correct, Doctor?
Edward didn't wait for an answer. From his binder, he withdrew a sealed folder.
Your Honor, I submit the complete disciplinary record of Dr. Carl Vernon from the State Medical Board.
A sharp gasp rippled through the gallery. Nancy's lawyer half rose, then sank back, mouth opening soundlessly.
This is an ambush. The evaluation was conducted in good faith.
Sit down, Doctor. This evidence was ruled admissible. Mr. Grayson, proceed.
Edward placed the file in the clerk's hand. The room braced for impact.
3 separate sanctions for fraudulent evaluations. Dr. Vernon, you will explain these to this court. Now,
Those were administrative misunderstandings. I was never. The board's actions were politically motivated.
Vernon's voice cracked. A bead of sweat traced his temple. The judge's glare did not waver. The gavel fell like a thunderclap. Judge Keller's voice was granite. We recess, and I will decide what to do with this witness. After the recess, Nancy's lawyer tried and failed to rehabilitate Vernon. Edward called his expert, Dr. Morrison. She took the stand with unshakable professionalism, carrying a thick file of test data. Edward's direct examination was crisp. He let the evidence speak. 2 days of testing, a full cognitive battery.
Mr. Grayson performed in the superior range on every metric. His memory, reasoning, and attention are all exceptional for his age.
Cross-examination only hardened her testimony. When pressed about payment, she answered without a flinch.
My report is based on objective data, not a fee schedule.
Judge Keller leaned forward. His skepticism now fell squarely on the petitioner's case.
There is no credible evidence of cognitive decline. In fact, Mr. Grayson outperformed my typical younger patients.
your testimony will carry great weight, Dr. Morrison. This court thanks you.
As she stepped down, the courtroom understood. Edward Grayson was fully competent. Nancy's petition was a lie. The clerk called the final witness, Nancy Grayson. She rose from the gallery, face pale, and walked to the stand as if approaching a precipice.
Just keep the story straight. He can't prove anything.
Nancy, you recently approached me for a substantial sum of money, over $200,000. Is that correct?
It was a loan. I intended to pay it back.
A loan. And when I refused, you filed this petition, did you not?
Nancy's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her lawyer started to rise, then sank back, realizing the trap.
Miss Grayson, you will answer the question.
I needed the money. I thought, Dad, please, I didn't mean.
The mask shattered. Nancy Grayson wept on the stand, her scheme laid bare for every eye in the courtroom. Judge Keller's face hardened. The petition was no longer about competency. It was about greed. Edward rose for his closing statement. The room, already silent, seemed to hold its breath.
Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. This petition was never about my competency. It was a financial ambush. My daughter hired a disgraced doctor to fabricate a diagnosis. She admitted her motive on this stand.
He gestured toward the empty witness stand, then toward Nancy in the gallery, her face buried in her hands.
For 30 years, I sat on the appellate bench. I know when a case is built on sand.
Judge Keller's pen had stopped long ago. He simply watched, face unreadable.
I ask this court not only to dismiss this petition, but to consider the fraud it represents.
Edward closed his binder. The silence felt like a verdict already.
This court will retire to consider its decision. We reconvene at 3 this afternoon.
The gavel fell. The judge rose and disappeared through the door behind the bench. The wait began. At 3 precisely, the door opened. Judge Keller emerged, face set like stone. The courtroom rose.
This court has considered the evidence and testimony. The petition for guardianship of Edward Grayson is denied with prejudice. The court finds no credible evidence of incapacity. Further, the petitioner's conduct raises serious questions of fraud.
The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot.
This matter is referred to the district attorney's office for review of filing a false legal document.
A strangled sob came from the gallery. Nancy doubled over, her lawyer gripping her arm, but she shook him off.
No, please, this wasn't. He can't do this.
The judge ignored her. He looked at Edward and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Edward rose, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. He did not look back. Behind him, Nancy collapsed into the bench, the sound of her weeping swallowed by the closing door. Edward walked the marble corridor alone, his footsteps the only sound in the hush of defeat behind him. The courtroom door flew open, and Nancy burst out, her face a mess of tears and fury. She grabbed his arm.
You think you've won? You've destroyed me.
I didn't destroy you, Nancy. You did that yourself.
She flinched as if struck. He looked at her with the same steady calm he'd worn on the bench for 30 years.
You forgot one thing. I spent 30 years on the bench. No one pulls a fast one on me.
He removed her hand from his arm, gently and deliberately, then turned away without another word. Edward pushed through the heavy doors and stepped into the sunlight. He did not look back. Inside, Nancy stood frozen in the empty corridor, the echo of his footsteps fading. Her sobs were the only sound left. For the first time, she understood the weight of the man she had tried to break, and that he had never been the frail old man she imagined. Edward returned to the quiet of his home, the familiar silence, no longer pressing but protective. He sat at his desk, lifted the phone, and dialed the number he'd kept for 30 years.
Richard, draw up an irrevocable trust. Nancy is to receive nothing from the principal, not a cent.
The following morning, he sat across a polished conference table and reviewed the final documents. His pen found the signature line. The stroke was bold, deliberate, final.
She will get an allowance, $500 a month, paid by a bonded trustee, enough to survive, not to scheme.
He added a single clause. Every disbursement would be reported to him monthly. Transparency was the unbreakable leash.
This is not revenge, it's consequence. She tried to steal my life. She will not get a second chance.
The trust was registered. The assets moved. The fiduciary engaged. By nightfall, his estate was a fortress. Edward closed the folder. Outside, the stars were out. Inside, the terms of Nancy's future were sealed. A month later, a certified envelope arrived at the house. The return address belonged to Nancy's attorney. Edward slid it open with a letter opener, his hands as steady as the day the petition came. My client has agreed to cooperate fully with the district attorney's review and has entered into a civil settlement.
So she's finally being smart, cooperating instead of fighting. It won't undo what she did.
In light of her cooperation, the matter will not proceed to criminal indictment. She will make restitution over time. He placed the letter on the corner of his desk, next to the trust documents, the edges aligned perfectly.
The legal machine had ground to its conclusion. Nancy would live with the consequences, a fixed allowance, and a mark on her record.
He didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in a daughter's fall, only the quiet recognition that the law had been served. He looked out at the garden, the late autumn light softening the lines of his face. The story was over. Not with a bang, but with a letter filed away, and a man returning to his roses. Twilight filled the study. Edward sat in his leather chair, a worn law book resting on his lap, unopened.
Funny. The whole case dismantled, my life saved, and the only thing I feel is the weight of a chair once shared.
He opened the book. The margins were filled with his own handwriting, dates, citations, arguments won long ago.
Every case I ever touched, I weighed with precision. But this one was my own.
The garden outside was fading into shadow. A single rose branch tapped the glass, restless in the breeze. Edward closed the book. The soft thud was the sound of a chapter ending, not just in the law, but in his blood.
I upheld the law. Even when it cost me a daughter, I would do it again.
He rose slowly and walked to the garden door. The night air was clean, untouched by the rot of the courtroom. He stood among his roses, the same ones he'd tended for decades. They bloomed without judgment.
Justice isn't always clean, but tonight the air is. That's enough.
The following afternoon, golden light draped the garden. Edward knelt among the roses, pruning shears in hand. A neighbor walking past the fence raised a hand. Edward paused and gave a quiet nod, his expression unburdened.
This is what I fought for. Not the money, not the win. Just the right to be here, in my own soil, left alone.
The shears clipped a dead branch. A new bud had already started beneath it, tiny and determined. For 40 years, the garden had been his witness, silent, patient, demanding nothing but the care he gave it. Now it held the only verdict that mattered. The season had turned, and he was still here. He thought of the courtroom, the gavel's echo, Nancy's tears. They were like fallen leaves, useful only as soil for the next season.
The law is not a weapon. It's a shield, and I've carried it longer than most.
In the distance, the courthouse stood silent, its columns bearing the weight of 1,000 decisions. Edward Grayson, the retired appellate judge, closed his eyes. The law had been upheld, and so had he. The shears snipped a final stem. Edward held the cut rose to the light, its petals a perfect cream. He paused, then looked up. The faintest smile crossed his lips, not triumph, just a quiet knowing.
All those years on the bench, and the simplest metaphors remain the truest. Prune the dead, the living thrives.
The camera pulled back, widening the frame until Edward was just a part of the garden, small and rooted. Then it froze. The image held a serene man with a rose, the law behind his eyes, and over that still frame, the words that defined the case. She picked the wrong man. For 30 years, Edward Grayson had read the law like a map of human weakness, and when his own daughter drew the knife, he didn't flinch. He simply disarmed her with the truth. The retired judge returned to his garden, but the story echoed far beyond the courtroom. Justice, in the end, was a quiet thing. A trimmed rose, a closed book, a man at peace. The screen fades to black, but the echo of the gavel remains. A daughter thought she could steal her father's last years. She picked the wrong man, because that man had spent 30 years on the appellate bench, reading the law like a map of human weakness. He didn't hire a lawyer. He became his own, and dismantled her case with the precision of a master. Dr. Vernon's fraudulent record was laid bare. Nancy's financial motive crumbled on the stand. The judge denied the petition with prejudice and referred the matter for fraud review. Edward Grayson returned to his roses, but his quiet victory echoed through the legal world. It was proof that the law, when wielded by those who understand it, is the mightiest shield. She picked the wrong man, and the law stood with him. Thank you for watching. If this story of justice inspired you, subscribe and share.